Hey guys, today we're going to be talking about tips to be a better IT professional in the workplace.
And it's not going to be just tips. I mean, we're going to start out with tips and all that and just kind of, what's the word, brainstorm and just spin off things that whatever we think of. Uh, and then we'll see where it goes from there. Last week it went pretty crazy.
Yeah.
What did we do? We started on hard drives.
And ended up with buying a MacBook.
Yeah. So if you haven't seen that video, go check it out.
I don't know. Is he going to put that on my face?
That'd be a good idea. Y'all don't want to see this anyway.
No, I don't either.
Okay, so let's see. Some good IT guy tips. So I know for me personally, the biggest thing I have a problem with is trying to remain professional and calm with people you probably want to hit over the head with a hammer sometimes. Although that's really not nice.
But it is true.
Yeah.
So a lot of times when you're out in the field, especially, you'll have a client or maybe a client secretary, which is sitting there and she's just, I want this and I want that, blah, 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 blah. No offense, ladies, but on average you talk a lot. And that's not a bad thing.
He talks a lot too.
What's funny is my wife is the talker, so I just kind of sit there and she just blabs. It's great. I don't have to say a thing. But that's beside the point. So you'll be dealing with a secretary, and she'll be going over these lists of things that she's accumulated over the last 2 weeks or whatever, of things that she wants done, or things that she doesn't understand why they work that way or whatever. And she could just be getting on your ever-loving blessed nerve because you showed up to do one thing. So one of the things that you can do is, quite honestly, just listen to her, tell her yes ma'am, make her happy, because at the end of the day, the faster you make her happy, the faster you can do what you were there to do. And it also means extra billable hours if you are a third-party contractor. So at the end of the day, it's all good for you. If you're a salaried employee, it's a little bit different, but at the end of the day, as IT professionals, our job is to fix problems. Whether those problems are something in the server room or there's something on a client's desktop, be it the secretary or the CEOs or whatever, it doesn't matter. Our job is to fix stuff. And the way that we go about fixing things and the manner of how we communicate with those people that we fix problems for is important. Now, that's not to say that there isn't a differentiation of I'm not here to do the accountant's job for them, but at the same time, if there's a quirk in Excel and you can help explain away that quirk, it's your job to do it.
Exactly. And he took a little bit different spin on where I was going with that, but it was still a very good spin. So, yeah, I mean, there's going to be people out there that you're going to get a call and it's a really simple fix, and you may be in the middle of 10 other things that are a whole lot more important. But if you can fix it in a few seconds, just do it, move on with your life. Don't get too upset about it. And if you have to vent, because we've all been there, if you have to vent, do it to people you know are not going to rat you out. Do it in a way that's going to be productive. And, okay, one of the problems we have at the place I work, we have a lot of people who call, and we have a very small IT department, so it's very hard for us to get to the phone immediately. So when we have, I don't know, we'll say 20 different places, all the employees calling us at once, it gets really hard. So maybe an example of productive complaining. I like that, productive complaining. So a good example of it, let's say you do take 10 or 15 calls in a 5-minute period. If you're going to complain about it, go to your boss and say, hey, we need to find a better way to do this. We need to find a better way to funnel these calls so that we can actually get stuff done. Do that. And then the other thing too, you've got to keep in mind, not everybody out there is computer literate. You may think, oh, I'm just going to change this. Let's say we got a website that doesn't work with Internet Explorer or doesn't work with Chrome or uses Java and can't use Chrome.
Why is Internet Explorer a requirement anymore?
I like Internet Explorer, okay? I'm sorry, guys. I know I'm probably going to get a lot of crap for this, but I do not have a problem with Internet Explorer.
There
I'm
is
sorry.
no end to the amount of crap you will get after the camera stops rolling.
He doesn't matter. So...
Well, that was rude. Anyways, continuing on.
What was I saying?
You're supposed to remember. Oh, you're talking about updating a website in the middle of getting hordes of calls.
Yes. So let's say that you have a website that's not working in a particular browser. For an IT person, it's nothing to go in and change the default browser or change PDFs to open up with Adobe Acrobat, or just have them open up with the Internet Explorer so you don't have the third party or the third application sitting on top of everything. A normal user is not going to understand how to do that. They're not really going to get what's going on. So you need to remember that and be patient and don't talk down to them. That's one of the worst things you can do. If you have an employee that calls you and you're rude and you come across as, I've got better things to do than deal with you, then
they're going to hate you.
They're going to hate you. They're going to complain to their superiors, who are going to complain to their superiors until it gets back down to you. And on top of that, believe it or not, you may need these people someday. Well, I say that, but you need them anyway because that's what gives you your job.
May I interject?
I
So
guess.
2 things. So one, something to keep in mind, and this is a growing trend that's happening in our industry. There are a lot of companies, third-party accounting firms, and all sorts of other business-related entities that have figured out that they don't have to get computer science majors and they don't have to get IT professionals to fulfill the same roles, because they're finding it's easier to get business majors and MBA holders and teach them the technology that they need with these growing generations to get the same job done that typically would be handled by nerds. So always keep in mind, this is a growing trend. This is something that can very easily happen to you. You could be replaced by an accountant. So do be very careful, especially in these types of situations like what we're talking about, where you could have someone that is of an older age and is illiterate. When they retire, they may be replaced by someone that is technologically savvy. And I do say that with a grain of salt, but do keep in mind, for a lot of these managers and a lot of these people that are thinking, well, why do I want to maintain an IT department when that IT department already doesn't give a crap about what makes money for the company? When I can bring in a bunch of MBAs, because I've seen it done by, Jim Bob's friend or whatever, who's running another company, and they've done it. The more widespread this becomes, the harder it's going to be to get people to actually hire on IT professionals to do that job if they figure out we can do a similar job without having to pay IT specific people that do want to sit in their server room, that do want to sit in their dark rooms, and do want to deal with just their little world of crap that makes the company run and somehow adds value to the business. Another thing to think of, just this week, I had a secretary who called me up, and literally she had a problem dealing with a Java applet and a web portal through Explorer, of all things. But at any rate, it wasn't wanting to pull up a PDF or an Excel document or something the way it was supposed to. I went to one of the other secretaries in a different department and said, hey, I have seen this problem that so-and-so is having. Can you help me figure it out? And I worked as a man in the middle in between these 2 people doing the exact same job and got something rectified that ended up being, at the end of the day, we had replaced our hard drive and it just needed a allow and remember for all time permissions. And that's what was at the end of the thing. But because of the way she was trying to do it the first time I showed up, I never got to see that message. It wasn't until after I learned what her job was in this particular very specific, 30-second capacity, how to interact with the system that I don't have permission to. It wasn't until I dealt that I could actually get her to the point to where her problem was solved. And so sometimes you have to do that type of thing, and sometimes it isn't necessary, like you don't have to do it, but it will make you stand out in your office as someone who's willing to go above and beyond what's required to get something done to fix the end user so they can continue adding value to the company and adding revenue. And so those are some of the things that you can think about when you're sitting there and going, this person calls me every day, they give me this exact same problem, I've talked them through this multiple times. Sometimes you just need to suck it up and do it, take care of them, make them happy. Sometimes you need to go to your manager, like Tyler had said a minute ago, and figure out a different way to handle the situation. And sometimes you simply need to say, you know what, let me transfer you to XYZ person in the office. They're going to be better suited to help you with this. Sometimes those are things that will help. But always keep in mind, every problem has a different solution. You don't have to do the same thing every time. You don't have to deal with the same person every time.
A couple of things I want to add to that, too. You were talking about making yourself stand out in the office.
Mm-hmm.
You can also, when you do that and you're nice to these people, you make yourself stand out to the people. And
makes your life easier.
Right. And most of the time, yeah, you're just talking to these people on the phone. But sometimes you do have to go on site and work on stuff. If you go in there and everybody is happy to see you and they enjoy having you there,
absolutely,
you're going to be more popular. You're going to have friends that you would have never had otherwise. And because they're not your typical, what do you call it? Like, they're not really your clique because they may not be
coworkers directly.
Right. So you really get more job fulfillment if you just suck it up, be nice, be courteous, be professional. Even if it drives you crazy, you will get a lot farther in the long run.
Also keep in mind, if they're happy when you walk in the door, if they call you before they deal with the way they're supposed to handle things, and they're happy when you walk in the door, it is going to make it so much easier when you're having a crappy day or when things happen beyond your realm of control and you can't get to something. I have literally had people that I've built up such a rapport with that when they call and say, this is a dire emergency, I need this now, I have built up such a rapport with them that I can tell them, I'm sorry, I have this, and this, I will get to you as quick as humanly possible. And they understand, one, my word is my law, and I will do it. I will get to them as soon as possible. And two, when I get there, they're actually greeting me and saying, is there anything we can do to help? Is there anything we can do to make this better? Because you're a good worker. We understand you know what you're doing. You're working your hardest. You're doing your level best. And if the best you can do is showing up a half hour after we told you we needed ASAP, then that's the best you could do. We have enough respect for you to know that that was what you could do. What can we do to help? And that's something that is invaluable, especially on those super stressful days.
I agree. It's very nice. Whenever you can talk to somebody who's not going to bite your head off because you can't fix them immediately. But let's say that you've got a client or customer or a problem employee that just will not leave you alone no matter what you do. Even if you fix their problem for the 10th time and they're not really having a problem anymore, but they just want to call you and complain about something. One of the strategies that, I'm not going to say I use, but one of the strategies you can use.
That means he's done it multiple times.
If it's something that okay, depending on what the problem is, it's all right to say, hey, I'm going to have to check on something or say, I'm going to have to go talk to my boss about this before I can do anything. Use that to just get off the phone in a polite manner where you are, you have a second to think, you can collect yourself, and as far as they know, you're working on the problem. And I'm not saying if it's, don't go work on the problem, but it's a way to ease the tension in this situation. Even if it's an emergency, they're going to feel much more calm about it, knowing that you are at least aware of the problem and you can go do something about it.
But you do, the ultimate importance on this is if you do something like that, do actually be working on it. Do be a person of your word, and even if you're just passing it off to somebody else, you're making sure that that person you pass it off to is actively doing something. Or if you're sitting there collecting your thoughts, yes, collect your thoughts. Take a few moments to de-stress and to get it out of your system. Get the frustration out of your system. But then immediately hop on it and get to the problem at hand. Because that's one of the things that is real easy for us, because our job is required to be multitaskers.
Mm-hmm.
We are required to do 30 things at one point in time. And it's real easy to drop the ball and say, oh yeah, I forgot about that one.
Ooh.
But one of the things that builds up that rapport with these people, one of the things that will get them on your side, get them to care more about you than the problem, is that due diligence, is that consistency that you have to have, that I said I'm going to do it and I did it. You know, that's one of the things that will make your failures much more acceptable in their eyes than if you're that person where, yeah, you say it, you talk a good talk, but I can't trust you're actually going to do it. Because 9 times out of 10, when you say you're going to go off and do something, you actually don't. You can't do that. You can't be that person, because then you'll never have the trust. And like right now, my bosses do not have the trust. They don't have the trust of the secretaries and the secretaries' bosses and department heads and different things. They do not hold trust with their peers. They do not hold trust with their superiors. They don't hold trust with me. And of course, I'm a peon, and I understand that. But at the same time, if you don't hold trust with the people that you put in responsibility or put in charge of your responsibilities, what do you have? It's very important. Trust and responsibility and due diligence are probably the 3 most important things, more so than knowing DNS servers or knowing file sharing or Windows 10 or whatever. You can know all the software in the world, but if you can't do anything, if you can't get the human element on your side, that knowledge isn't worth anything.
Something that computer people have a problem with is the human element.
Yeah.
But
because we like the ones and zeros.
but it really is important. I mean, you guys have to be people person. People person.
What?
People person. Kind of.
Okay.
You have to know how to act like a people person, in some respect.
You gotta fake it a little bit.
Yeah.
So I mean, I'm an introvert. I do not like talking to people. I don't like being around people I don't know. But at the same time, there does have to be a little bit of banter. You know, you do have to be subject matter experts, shall we say, or subject matter novices in a lot of fields. Because when you're sitting there and you're tapping away on somebody's computer fixing their problem, they're just sitting there twiddling their thumbs. I mean, for all they know, you could be putting a virus on it. You could be disabling something they need or uninstalling Office. I mean, they don't know. How many times do you think the average user has seen Office uninstalled?
Exactly.
And of course, they don't know the difference between Office being installed and Office being uninstalled because it looks the same. Thank you, Microsoft. But
well, hey, to uninstall it, you've got to go through the programs and features in the control
not
panel.
always. Sometimes it puts that little uninstall thing inside of it. Now, of course, Office isn't that consistent about it or anything, but occasionally there are stuff like that. And for different programs, there would be different natures of things. I was just using Office as an example.
I know.
But, they don't understand what you're doing. So if you can't explain it to them in layman's terms, the least you can do is throw them a bone and talk about something. Throw a dart at the board and try to figure out something they're interested in. So if you look around their office and you see that they have golfing trophies or, little golf club pins or something, I don't know, then take a stab that they like golf. Ask them about the PGA tournament. It might be the middle of summer and there ain't one, but you can give it a shot. There's no telling what tricks they have in their office that can clue you in to something that they like. Say they have a photo of their kids. You can ask them what grades they're in. Parents love talking about their kids most of the time. There's these little things that they put around their office to indicate who they are as a person. They're not consciously doing it. It's a subconscious thing. We like to be around things that make us comfortable. And things that make us comfortable is things that we like. Use that to talk to them if you can't explain in layman's terms get them to engage in that type of conversation about what you're actually doing. It makes them much more comfortable with you.
So there's a couple of things I want to add to that too. Well, one's really an addition. The other one is kind of moving to a different part of the different tip, so to speak. So what he's talking about let's say that you go into a grocery store and you're standing in line at the checkout counter and the cashier doesn't greet you, doesn't even acknowledge your presence, and you've got your stuff up there and you're watching her check stuff out. It comes across as really rude, and it's a bad experience.
It can also be unnerving, because think about it. Sometimes you're giving this person your credit card, and you don't know if they're gonna swipe it through a duplicator first. I mean, you have to pay attention to that kind of thing, but that is something that has happened in the past. But it does come across as unnerving.
Yeah. So if you're in corporate IT, then the employees you serve are basically your customers. If you're in contract IT or just an IT shop, then your customers are your customers. So if these people aren't happy, if they're not enjoying you being there, you may not come back. Well, especially in the contract side of it. And if you don't come back, then that's extra money you're not getting. So that's why it's really important to be a human, be nice, be friendly, be professional. Yep. So the next thing I kind of want to add to this, you're talking about emails and stuff. One thing that I do that I find really helpful is that, as far as like the multitasking and keeping track of stuff. If you're at a location, a remote site, and you get hit with 3 or 4 different things that they want you to look into, or just, little notes, the problems that they're having, tell them, okay, send an email to whatever your, if you've got a support account, if you've got
some
a support
type of
address,
email address that you can get access to directly.
Yeah, that way it's gonna be there, and when you get back to the office, I mean, it may be 3 hours, it may be 2 days before you get back to the office. Yeah.
Memories.
So it's really helpful to have that sitting there when you get back. So, oh yeah, I need to do this, so I'm going to get on it. I mean, it could be just something as simple as I need to interoffice them a mouse or a keyboard. That stuff is really easy to take care of. You literally put a name on it, go shove it in a box somewhere, and let the couriers deal with it.
Yep.
But if you forget about it for a week, and then they have to call you and say, hey, where's my mouse at? Well, at that point, it's going to be another 2 or 3 days after that before they get it, because it has to go through the mail process.
And also it makes you look bad because they're sitting there going, oh, you forgot about it. I wasn't important enough to you for a whole stinking week to where I had to get off my butt and do something. And that just makes you look really bad. It makes them very furious, and it kills the rapport that you may have had with them. Another thing, bouncing off of that I have seen with clients. So say you're running a mom and pop IT repair shop, or say you're doing contract work with anybody. When they hit you up with an idea, or when they send you an email and say, hey, why don't you look into this? Hey, why don't you give me feedback on that? Or can you do X, Y, Z? It doesn't really matter what it is. But if you're taking more than 24 hours or 48 hours to get that done, and be able to send them a message saying it is done, it is fixed, every day or two, it's a good thing to touch base with them and say, hey, I haven't forgotten about you. I remember this thing. I've gotten this far with it. Or, just give them some kind of heads up. I remember your issue, and I am working on it. It makes them feel much more comfortable of going, and you may have done nothing. Like, in all honesty, as far as they're concerned, you could have done nothing. But the fact that you're reaching out, you're taking the time to let them know, I remember you, you are still important, and I'm working on it, makes them feel all the comfort in the world, all the warms and fuzzies, because he remembered me. You know, this was important enough to where he is remembering, and it's taking more time than he thought. It makes a world of difference to them. And that's just common business stuff that IT guys generally don't have to deal with. It's becoming more and more that way because we're becoming more outside the server room individuals, but it's not something we've had to deal with for a long time. So it's good to be reminded of that every once in a while.
And that's a very good point. I'm glad you made that. And I'm not being.
I know it's it's one of those things you just don't think about. It's I've had problems where literally I was working on something for 2 weeks straight. Completely skipped my mind to let them know that I was working on their crap. And when I got around to them, I'd had enough rapport with this particular customer to where it wasn't a big deal, and we got a good chuckle out of it together. But especially when you're trying to build that, and especially just on a day-to-day practice routine, you want to make sure that everybody understands this is where I am. I am thinking of you. I am working on your problem. I am doing X, Y, and Z, so that people don't think you're doing nothing. That's something I've heard multiple bosses mention to me in the past of, hey, instead of bringing this machine back to our office, why don't you work on it there so they actually see that you're working? Mm-hmm. I don't like that idea 9 times out of 10 simply because I don't have all the tools and the capabilities outside of the office that I would inside the office. And it also allows me to do multitasking if I'm outside the office. But that's something on a case-by-case thing. So like if you're going to reformat a machine, you have to back it up and then do the format and then stick the old data back on it. I wouldn't do that in their office. Even though it's possible, even though it's relatively easy, it's a lot of you sitting there. And that's a perception that I don't want people to have. Even though I know that when I'm backing up a machine, I can't touch it. Or when I'm installing from disk, I can't touch it. They don't know that. And I know they don't know that. So I don't want that perception. But that is something to be careful about, something to think about. But anytime you can do something on site and you're going to be active with it, as long as you don't have something, multiple things that you need to be multitasking on, go for it. And even if you do need to multitask, if you can, like with a laptop, something simple, you can be using remote desktop assistants and different things to multitask and get other things done while you're working on their stuff. They're going to see, 1, how busy you are, 2, how dedicated you are to doing multiple things and putting out a lot of fires, and it's really going to help on your perception. But just sitting there watching a progress bar is not going to help your perception. So just a thought.
So, every you know what? Let's just. I don't know what I was saying. I kind of like, pew. So yeah, make sure they know you're working on it.
That's important.
But okay, so now I know where I was going with that. So you're talking about using email to communicate and let them know that that you're working on it. Something else you need to do, if depending on the environment, especially this probably applies more to a corporate environment.
Probably, I think I know where you're going.
If you have a problem, like let's say you have a server that goes down, and there's nothing you can do about it until you just get it back up, and it's going to be an hour. Mm. You don't want people calling you from every branch every 3 seconds because they can't get to something. You already know they can't get to it, and they're not going to know that 100 other people have also tried to contact you while you're trying to fix the problem. And in a situation where a server goes down, that gets really stressful because not only do you have your boss yelling at you, you've got his bosses yelling at you. So, anyway. So
you just have a lot of people yelling at you. I see where he's going with this.
What you need to do, in your Exchange server, or if you use a Google business account, however it may be. Make sure you have quick email lists set up, so for basically for all employees. Shoot an email out to everybody saying, hey, we're aware of this issue, we'll let you know when it's fixed.
Right.
That it's going to eliminate a lot of headache.
It can. The one problem that happens from that, and you know as well as I do, that especially with the older generations, not to make fun of them and not to be rude in any way, shape, or form. All respect to them. They're ending their careers, but a lot of them are not as go-to with email as some of us that have grown up with it. And so even if you send out that email, you're still expect at least 10% of everybody that uses that server for something, even if you set this up, even if you send out the emails, the second it's been made aware that that's gone down, still expect some of them to say, hey, did you know this wasn't up? We're not being able to get to it. It's going to happen. Take a deep breath. It's okay. That's just them saying, well, I didn't check first. And what you can do is simply say at that point, and of course, be cordial, be very polite, be very nice, and just say, yes, ma'am, we already know about that. We sent out an email to your inbox. And so just double check that you received it so that we make sure that next time this happens, we know that you're getting these emails. Because again, nobody's perfect.
Right.
If you set up this chain ahead of time and you just missed somebody, or somebody got added to it and they weren't added to the email list or whatever, and it makes them feel comfortable and it lets them know without going, oh, you dumb fill in blank, it lets them know, hey, next time this isn't down, I need to go check my email. Now, will all people get that? No, you're still going to get calls even on the third and fourth and fifth times that these things happen, but eventually you will train the climate to expect an email the second something goes down. At the same time, there are ways to mitigate that so that you have like Raspberry Pis or something stupid simple sending out pings every 5 or 10 minutes. And this is something that could be very useful, is setting up a system like that to send a ping to a server, and if it doesn't get it back, it sends an email to you saying, hey, this email server's down, or this whatever service is down, so that when you get managers starting to call your office, you can say, hey, we already did it. We're already working on it 5 minutes ago. And it makes you look insanely good and makes your boss look good, which is just good all around.
And speaking of that, just kind of give a little teaser. I've actually written a script that does exactly what you were just talking about.
Pinging the servers to see when they're down?
Yeah. And what I'm going to do, I would like to go through, it's all done with batch, and so anybody can do it. Hey.
Well, my downside of that is it requires Windows, but let's face it, most of the world runs Windows. So
I'll teach him how to do it in Bash.
I already know how to do it.
Okay. So I'm going to do it in Windows, and then, I don't know, maybe you
I'll
might do
replicate
it
in Bash.
Yeah, so you guys have some more options. But we're going to do a full line-by-line coding section, or coding video on creating a script that will go out and ping your servers and email you when they go down.
Something that I've seen along these lines is use the batch script and do those types of things, but also I've seen, for those of you that like building things, using Raspberry Pis and plugging them up to Arduinos to run LEDs. Put them in a nice little case and whatnot, and just have that visible. Say you have a floor of cubicles, and you can just look up and see, hey, number 4 server's down. And there's stuff like that to where it's cheap. We're talking maybe $50 at most to get the parts and things for this. It gives you a weekend coding project, but it also brings you into the fold from your manager's perspective of saying, hey, not only is he doing a really good job, but he's going above and beyond the Call of Duty, and he's improving the workflow of our troubleshooting and of our error detection and things of that nature, making things easier for us as a department to do our jobs and to let other people know when services are down or something. And there's also, obviously, you can make, if you just wanted to do application side things, for desktops, there are ways to do that same sort of a thing through a taskbar application. And of course, for that, you would have to get approval to have that put out on everything. But the idea of, building a physical light show, if we'll call it, to let people know, hey, this service is not running right. Or something like that. It could be a good indicator and give you guys something fun to do.
And any kind of coding project that's not for like a class where you're doing like cookie cutter stuff, anything you can do coding wise is going to build your skill set. Yeah. So even if it's something that it turns out you're not going to actually be able to use, you still had the experience and it's still fun.
And it's still something you can show at the next job and say, hey, I built this, that may, something like that, even though it is simple, even though it's a weekend project, the fact that you're willing to put forth that level of effort into things, even if they get shot down by your current boss, your next boss or prospective boss may be like, I like where you're going. I want someone like that, and put you in a completely different job spot than what you were applying for. And those are kind of things that do happen. If they want someone who's a coder, if they want someone who is a little nichey, and it's like, well, we don't really know how to formulate this job search, or we kind of just want someone that does this laundry list of stuff, and it's weird. Those things happen. A lot of those people get hired without a job search ever formally being put out. So it could set you apart from the rest of us. Well, it's true. Anything you can do to set yourself apart is an A+ in most people's book.
Well, between me and him, it's probably not hard to be set apart from us, but...
Well, I like the server room.
Huh?
I like dark rooms.
Yeah.
It's not hard to be set apart from me. Just keep me away from people and put me in somewhere dimly lit and give me this and a server. I'm happy. Doesn't take a whole lot.
So, at this point, we've covered basically how to be a better people person and how to make people like you and how to save yourself some headache. Now, I've only got one idea so far of what you could do for this, but let's talk about how you can make your own work faster and easier.
Automation.
Yes. So, and depending on what you do, especially in a corporate environment, there's going to be stuff that you have to do every day that is not going to be complicated, but it still takes time. Automate the crap out of it. That's what Batch is used for, and Bash in the Linux world.
And PowerShell.
Yeah, PowerShell.
Which is trying to emulate Bash. That's why they created it.
Yeah.
It's sad.
I need to use PowerShell more. But
I'll get a book.
Okay, thank you. I'm going to make a video of me reading the book. That's all you guys are going to see is me reading the book. I'll have him make sound effects. Maybe we can get Morgan Freeman too.
Narrate you reading a book?
Yes.
You ain't got the money for that kind of thing.
That's where you guys come in.
Actually, that's where Alexa comes in.
What's Alexa?
So Amazon's Echo, Alexa is the voice assistant that helps out with that. Don't quote me, but I'm 99% sure like a week or two ago, I heard that Morgan Freeman had been paid to be one of the voices for Alexa. Which is going to be funnier than snot. But I have to say, one of the things, I hate Alexa. I don't like the Amazon Echo, and there's a huge list of security reasons for that, But one of the nerdiest things, they have a word list that basically allows you to activate, kind of like Google, when you do it on your Android or whatever. One of them is computer. So any of you that have seen Star Trek The Next Generation know exactly what I'm talking about. Computer, Earl Grey tea, hot. Oh, I love it. I just can't wait until we get replicators. That's going to be awesome.
Do 3D printers count as replicators? Very slow replicators.
Can they get me a waffle?
It may not be edible, but they can get you a plastic waffle.
Then
Anyway,
it's not a waffle.
so anyway, where I was going with the whole automation thing. So
how do we define what a waffle is and is not?
Can you eat it?
That's defined by a lot of things. But which criteria you want to pick? Is it tasty or does it come out the other end in a funky shape?
I don't even like waffles.
Why?
I like pancakes, but I don't like waffles.
Do you ever put chocolate chips in the batter before you stirred it into the...
But you can do that with pancakes too.
Yeah, but...
Waffles tend to get way too much syrup, and we have gotten way off topic.
Waffles. That's going to make
Bacon.
you a better IT person.
Bacon
But
and
no,
waffles.
automate it. So automate it with Python, with Bash, with Batch, PowerShell, anything that you can. Anything you can do to make it, shall we say, idiot-proof. Or to make it in such a way to where it's faster and you are physically having to do less things is going to be valuable to you. Because it's something you can take with you from one job to the next. Windows domains are not changing anytime soon. You will always have to add a computer to the Windows domain. So we wrote a batch script at our office. Or not a batch script, a PowerShell script, my bad, that allows us to run a one-line script in PowerShell. Of course, it's administrative level, elevated and all that kind of fun crap. But we run it, and the only thing we have to do is give it a username and a password. And then it does everything else for us. It puts it in a default OU. It does a lot of things. I'll get it to you. It's really easy. It's simple. It's like 30 lines of code or something. It's not a big deal. And for that, you have to know the trees and the domain and your structure and all sorts of stuff like that to be able to put it into a specific OU. And OU stands for organizational unit, just in case anybody didn't know. But there's stuff like that you can do that streamlines it and makes it a lot simpler because we're putting it into a default thing, and so it takes a lot of headache out of stuff. We don't have to go through and create the account, the computer account, before we add the computer to the domain, because if we didn't do that, it would go into some default thing, default area that nobody in my office has access to because they're segmenting off how the forest works and who has access to what, which is a smart thing to do. But again, something like this automates it and makes it faster. There are things that we have that automate pointing to a KVM or a KMS server to get our Windows activation keys and things of that nature so that we can do it much quicker and we don't actually have to know all the details. And that's one of the great things. You can get automation set up to a point and literally just hand the keys over to a monkey and say, all right, go churn it out. And they can go forth and do it. It makes you more valuable to the company if you're churning out these scripts. And it also makes everybody else that comes into that office from here on out have to know less, which is always better from the manager's perspective because if I have to train you less, that's less time and money I'm spending on you, which makes you more expendable. Or not you specifically, but the next guy. Makes him more expendable. But you as the person that's writing all these scripts and automating all this stuff, you are just being elevated in value because you're making it cheaper for the company to maintain an active and useful IT office. And so those are some of the things that will really help your career as an individual as well as the profession as a whole. To get these kinds of things automated and to get little things. There was a Facebook post going around last summer where it was talking about some Russian guy, and I'm not sure if I could find this to link it in, but it had, basically he had the concept of anything that takes me less than 90 seconds, I'm going to automate it. He automated making coffee. Don't know how he did that. He automated all kinds of stuff. And if you go find the GitHub, which it's linked in the post, so I guess I'm going to have to find it now. But I went through and downloaded it, and it's just stuff and just racks of these scripts that just, you click them and they run. Now, they were built for a specific office. Obviously, his coffee maker had an IP address. Don't even want to know about that one. But there are these different things that you can do that would speed your process and speed your workflow and make you more valuable to the company, which means raises faster, promotions faster, makes training new employees easier because you're training them to use a script instead of training them to put something in a specific OU when you're adding a computer to the domain or whatever, which brings in the possibility and the potential of user error, and then you've got to spend time to go fix those user errors, where if you automate it, it's consistent. It's like clockwork. Every time you run that, it does the exact same thing.
And I want to add a couple of examples to that too, of like what I use at work and what I do.
You tend to do that more than I do.
So one of the things that we have to do is checklists. You'll probably have to do checklists just from an auditing standpoint, and making sure that certain things are done every day. So what I did, I wrote a simple batch script that would open up Excel silently and run a macro, essentially Visual Basic script, inside that worksheet and just print it out. So all I have to do when I print that, instead of having to wait on Excel to open up, wait for the document to load, wait for the GUI to react to me clicking it and then going through the print dialog, I literally just have to open that batch file and it prints it for me, and I never see Excel open up. So, and I know it's...
You know what you ought to do with that?
What?
Like, in all honesty, you ought to set that up in the Windows scheduler to run that like 8 o'clock in the morning every day.
Oh, that is a good idea. I may have to do that.
Automation. And that's something in Windows, I'm sure you can show them how to do. Windows scheduling. And then in Mac and Linux, I'll create a video, which I've got in the works, of doing cron jobs, which is the exact same thing. It's the idea of, every hour this task, be it a single one-line command or be it a script, will run and do whatever. And you can set them up different ways. Windows gives you the ability to do it by hour, minute, date. I don't think you can do it like every other Tuesday or something like that.
I think you can. I think you basically set it up as, okay, I'm going to do it weekly, and then you say, I want this day of the week.
But how do you do it every other Tuesday? See, that's the thing. I don't know if you could do something like that. But again, like, there are ways to play with it.
And I'm sure there's third-party applications that will do it.
Yeah.
Honestly, Windows Task Scheduler sucks.
It does, but the more things you can do without installing extra software, the better off you technically are.
Right.
But again, it's just thought, and I know what you're going to be doing tomorrow or Monday.
Maybe not Monday. Monday's going to be a busy day.
At any rate, sorry to interrupt.
Oh, you're fine. And another thing that I do that you probably wouldn't even think of, because it's a simple process. You think, okay, I'm going to go to a file share and open up this document, look at it, and then close it out. If that's something you have to do every day, again, you're not going to think to automate that.
But it can save time.
So here's what I did to automate that task. If I know a file is supposed to be somewhere at the same UNC path every day, I just have a batch file that literally has that UNC path in it to the file, and when I click run the batch file, it just opens that file up. So I don't have to sit there, and especially, depending on how complex your network is set up and your file sharing system, you might have to type in 10 different folder names to get to this thinking file every day.
Yeah.
So just automate it. Yeah, it's not a big, look, I'm going to show everybody what I did today. No, this saves you 30 to 40 seconds of typing every time you want to look at that file.
And again, not everything comes back to professional development and escalation and different things of that nature. Not everything comes back to promotions. But at the same time, look at it this way. If you can shave off 10 seconds of a task you have to do every day, 10 seconds, so let's just do it, 10 seconds times 5 days a week times 52 weeks a year, and then divide that whole thing. So 26,000 divided by 60.
That's 2,600.
Yeah, that's what it's supposed to be. So you just shaved off 43 minutes, assuming my math's right, but you just shaved off 43 minutes from your year. 43 minutes of time you spent doing a 10-second task that's utterly worthless. You could have been checking email, you could have been doing any number of things to literally double click a thing, have the computer spin up a thread to do that task while you're looking at something else. Like, you start compiling that and you start saying, well, we're going to do that, across 30 different times, 30 different tasks that you're wasting 10 seconds on every day. You're looking at hours. Now, of course, this comes back to how much do you want to get paid for crap that you're not actually doing. But for those of us that are heavily inundated with tasks and have a lot of things that need to get done, being able to streamline these ridiculously small processes into simpler, less time-consuming things, it's valuable. It adds the amount of work that we're able to do in a day. And not to loop it back into raises and promotions, but if you are able to do this kind of a thing and get to the point to where you are, 20 or 50 hours a year more productive, then you're looking at an hour of more productivity per week than your coworkers. And that's going to, your bosses are going to notice if they're doing the job right. And of course, if they're not doing their job right, well, you need to ask yourself some questions about whether you want to continue working there. But that's beside the point. That's a different conversation for another day. You do want to look at this from a standpoint of, is it useful? 10 seconds a day doesn't seem very useful. But you start adding that up, that's very useful. And we're all wishing that we had more hours in the day to get work done. We're all wishing that we have more time to do things that we want to do. And so if you're able to figure out how to compile these things into something that does end up having massive gains, that can be nothing but good. Mm-hmm. It can get you to the point where you can justify when you talk to your boss and say, hey, we need this server. Well, you've done this automation thing, and it really makes you better than everybody else. Maybe you know what you're talking about. And that is a legitimate thing. That is a legitimate thing. I have seen bosses that herald the most worthless people I have worked with as amazing because they were able to write simple scripts and simple code that did simple things. And it made them be perceived as better than the rest of us, even though they didn't do diddly squat. Something to think about.
So, the two things. If you're going to do automation, though, and in any, pretty much anything you do in IT that's a process that somebody else is going to have to do, document it.
Oh, yeah. Comments in code.
Well,
Dear God, comments in code.
Yes, comment the code, and also fire up a Word document, make a documentation template, and store it somewhere where anybody who does anything can get to it. And just write a quick write-up of, okay, this is why I did it, this is how you do it, this is why,
this is what it does.
Yeah.
And this is how you will break it.
So that way, 2 years down the road, if you decide to leave, then the person taking your spot, all they got to do is look at that documentation to figure out what the crap you did, rather than either having to rewrite everything and redo it.
Or actually have to know what language you did it in and figure out if they trust it. Which, again, that can be an issue.
Right.
You never know what you're going to do to dork your employees or coworkers.
So, along the same lines of automation, now, you're probably not going to like this one.
Oh, go for it.
So, if you're familiar with, use Batch or PowerShell, you can use that information, or use that language and commands in that language, applications, whatever the crap I'm trying to say. Yeah. You can use those to get information about any computer in your domain, assuming the admin $ and C $ default shares are enabled.
Yeah.
You can use that information, and if you know how to do that, you're going to be able to export all of that stuff to a CSV document. If you don't know what a CSV document is, it's comma separated value. Yeah. And all that means is there are it's columns.
Mm. Okay, when you look at it in Excel, it looks like an Excel spreadsheet. There's not really a whole lot of difference. When you look at the actual file inside of a text editor, which in case you don't know what a text editor is, it strips away all of the markup languages and what they're doing. So if you want bold font, there's specific syntax that is added into the code of what a file is that makes a specific font bold or a specific line bold or anything. And so when you're looking at something in a text editor, it's looking at here's the legitimate code that makes up your Excel spreadsheet. In a comma separated value in a CSV file, it literally is here's a word, here's a comma, here's another word, here's a comma, so forth and so on. It's very simple. And it works out really well if you're wanting to export or import large amounts of data because it's a very simple, non-syntax added file type that can transport between systems very easily. And I actually do like the idea of doing
Well,
that.
I haven't got to the whole point yet.
Yeah. Word of warning before he continues, do make sure before you're throwing any type of erroneous stuff across the network that you are cleared to do it by, say there's a department that handles networking, clear it by them first, because the last thing you want is them to flag something as malicious that you're doing, that you've already shown to your bosses and they think it's the bee's knees, and then suddenly it gets flagged and a whole bunch of hoo-ha happens because everybody's pissed off and it can go south real quick. So do clear it through the proper authorities that handle your network and so forth and so on. Do keep in mind, unless you're the CTO or CIO or some type of higher level manager inside of a company, you can get in trouble real quick by doing your job. So with that said, continue on.
So with Batch and PowerShell, it's very easy to output the data the way you want it to a CSV file. Mm-hmm. It's literally, I want this piece of data, then I'm going to put a comma. I want this piece of data, and then I'm going to put a comma. That's all you have to do. So let's say you've got 100 employees and you want to get the NTFS file permissions. Is it NTFS or NTSS?
NTFS is the partition.
What am I thinking of then?
I don't know.
So anyway, you can get the file permissions and folder permissions that.
You're talking about the security permissions on a folder or file.
Yeah, is that
Windows keeps?
NTFS? What? I can't even think of.
Oh, that's not NTFS. NTFS is the new technology filing system. That's what you format a Windows drive into. But at any rate, it's syntax stuff that's built around the file that has to do with how it's stored and who has permission to access XYZ file.
Right.
You can get that kind of information apparently through these scripts.
So when you do that and you put into the comma separated value file, learn Excel. This was my main point that I didn't think you were going to like.
Oh, I hate Excel, but I know how to use it.
Okay. So learn Excel, because once you get that data into a format that Excel is happy with and is readable, then you can do whatever you need to with it. If you've got extra information in there that you don't need, you can, in most cases, hide it depending on how you've structured your comma separated value file.
Just call it CSV.
The CSV.
Or you can just delete it altogether. Because again, when you're creating these types of things, you get to cherry pick. Because again, you are the coder, you are the programmer doing this. You can cherry pick and say, I don't want these. There's an app that I made, or actually I didn't make it, I watched it made on YouTube, and I replicated it for Electron, which is something hopefully I will learn enough how to use and how to deal with. But basically using HTML, CSS, and JavaScript over top of an API layer to build desktop level applications. And for any of you guys that know web programming and have dealt with website hooks and different things, there's a lot of information out there that you can literally just query and say, hey, I want this. And then when using JavaScript, say, all right, I want to trim off this fat, I don't want these things, and then just display exactly what you want. And so this is almost verbatim the exact same thing of just saying, hey, I'm putting out this batch file. It is going through and doing all these things and gathering all this data. And you may be gathering it in bulk, or you may figure out a way to trim it off before it gets back to your machine to limit the amount of bandwidth that you're using. But once you do that, you're able to pick. I only want computer names, or I only want computer names, CPUs, and RAM, or whatever. Depending on what you're able to get with these things, you are able to trim off and have exactly what you want before you put it into a CSV file. Or after you get in a CSV file, you can have that CSV file with a macro that goes through and trims out specific things. Whatever works best for something you understand and you can replicate. That's the important part. Something that you understand. The last thing anybody wants is you hopping up to them, all happy as a lark and whatnot, going, I made this thing and it's going to make our life so much better. And then they're like, okay, well, let's take a look at it. Let's, talk me through the code. And they point at something and go, what is this? And you're just like, I don't know, I copied it off the internet. If you do not understand it, do not use it. Like, research it, figure it out. And of course, test it. You're testing it at home, you're testing it outside of your company's network or whatever. But before you take it to a manager, before you take it to a boss, make sure that either you have comments that state out exactly what everything is and how it's operating, or that you can explain to them, this is what that code is, this is how it works, this is what it's doing. Because the last thing any manager wants is some snot-nosed person showing up with something they want to run that you can't tell you if it's going to wreak havoc or not. And of course, we don't all have domains sitting at home. We don't all have virtual machines farming out an entire 50 computer network at home that we can just screw around with. But, within reason, be able to explain everything that's going into that. Otherwise, they're going to look at you and they're going to mark you as an idiot forever. And none of your scripts will get used, and none of the things that you're doing that's going to benefit them will be useful because you screwed the pooch. And again, that goes back to respect. That goes back to building rapport with those around you. That works inside the IT office as well as outside the IT office.
So I think we've got a pretty good...
I think we've beat this into the ground.
Actually, I've got one more thing.
One more.
And
all right.
we can cut it after this, or we can keep going. I don't care. We're getting over an hour now. So, I don't care. I mean, do you guys
How much do you guys want to listen to us? See, I would put this on in the background. I would be working on something and have it, because I can do picture-in-picture. I would be working on something and have this little square down the back.
Just be listening to it.
Yeah.
So,
I do that every day with all sorts of YouTube channels.
So if you guys need some noise to go to sleep to at night too, we're here for you.
Really? We're going to lull them to sleep?
So the point I wanted to add, whenever you make configuration changes to anything that could potentially affect anything more than just your computer, like firewalls, switches, that kind of thing, make a backup of your configuration that's already in there and working. Especially if you absolutely have to do it during business hours for some reason. That's another thing. Don't ever do anything during business hours if you can avoid it. And even if it's after business hours, you still want to have the backups because it could take longer than you have.
What is an example of when you would have to do something in business hours? If it's already working, like if it's fine, why would you, what possible change would you have
So let's say you've got a sonic wall that was going fine until 11 o'clock that morning.
Okay.
And then you have an executive that calls you and says, hey, I can't get in. Like, okay.
But it's already broken. Like, sure, back it up, then make the changes so that at least you can get back to a clean slate. But it's already broken. I'm saying there's no functionality that's
if it's only broken for one or two people. Let's say you're trying to troubleshoot an issue for a particular person who won't, who can't wait on you.
It's not willing to wait.
Yeah. Have your backups sitting there before you do anything. That way, especially in a sonic wall situation, because sonic walls are very easy to completely take down the network, and if you do that, you're gonna have a lot of problems.
Please don't use sonic walls. I know they're made by Dell, but Dell was great in the 90s.
Dell doesn't own SonicWall anymore.
Yeah, who does?
I don't remember, but Dell doesn't own them anymore. They sold them about, I don't know how many months ago. It's been probably 6 months to a year ago. I think.
It's in the months. Okay. Well, that explains why I don't know about it.
So,
Wow.
but yeah,
Dang. I'm going to look that up.
I had this happen to me personally. I was working on the configuration for a different sonic wall than the one that, like, it wasn't our primary sonic wall. And I was working on it, and I had them both open at the same time. And don't laugh at me for this, but somehow
Too late.
I got the two sonic walls, you know, I had the different windows open, and I got them confused with each other. I still don't know how it happened because I was being very conscious of which one I was working on, but somehow I took down our main network.
What?
Well, it's more like I didn't take down the network. I effectively took down the network. It was still up, but
Did
there was
you
a content.
destroy the default gateway or something?
No, the content filtering setup. Do you know what that is?
Yeah.
So, the way it works in SonicWall is that you can use single sign-on from your Active Directory,
Okay.
and when you do that, you have to set all of your configuration settings up in the SonicWall to connect to your Active Directory or a domain controller. So I was trying to replicate those settings on the secondary domain, the SonicWall, and somehow I made a change to the primary one, and it broke the connection, and I couldn't figure out what was going on. So about an hour probably about an hour of me working on this, freaking out, I finally got it to work, and nobody noticed. So I was in the clear. But
You lucky son of a gun.
Yeah.
Holy cow.
But things like that can happen. And
that's why you want good rapport. Otherwise they will eat you alive.
yes.
Holy crap.
So
On a side note, Dell sold Dell software, which includes the Sonic Wall, to a private equity firm, Francisco Partners and Elliott Management. So it's now privately owned, which is really weird to me because I don't know what in God's name that company would want with it. But that's totally beside the point. But wow.
yeah.
You took down the whole network and nobody noticed.
It didn't take down the whole network. It just
That's what you said.
Yeah, that's what I said. Yeah.
So
but
it took
people just
down
couldn't get to websites anymore.
Oh, so they could. So the intranet was fine, and it was the
Yeah.
default gateway. Either that or it was the DNS. Because DNS would have handled domain name resolution for outside the network. Because
it
it
wasn't
would have had
those
to
settings.
communicate.
It wasn't those settings. It was basically what you had to do is you had to give it a username and password to connect to the domain controller. And I know this sounds simple.
That sounds dumb.
Well, you have to give it basically an administrative password to connect to the domain
To
controller.
get outside the network.
No.
But you just said to talk to the DNS controller,
Not
you
the
had to
DNS,
have.
the domain controller,
Oh,
which is also the DNS server.
yeah. That's
So,
the one.
Yeah. So, what had happened was that the way that SonicWall wants you to input, like the way it wants you to format the username and password, there's several different options of how you can do it, and you have to do it just right. And I don't remember now, but it's something like you have to have the domain name slash the username. And I know, again, that sounds simple, but there's all other settings and stuff in there. But, I mean, I just had to play with it until I got a combination that worked again.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
That actually reminds me of, so Ubuntu and Windows Domain
Oh, gosh.
do not play well together. In case you didn't notice from his cringing, I created a script to automate this, which works out really well. I just need to add in some if statements for control so that it doesn't continue doing the script once it's done. But it's totally beside the point. The thing is, there's a really fun thing with the Ubuntu 14.04 and later to where you can no longer use the likewise package to talk with the domain controller. And so what Power Broker has done, they're a third-party company, they went through and they created a wrapper for it to deal with it. We ended up breaking it at one point in time because quite literally there's a config file that hasn't, you have to make a couple of edits to it and whatnot. But one of the things that has is a delimiter between the domain name and the username. And it's 2 slashes. 2 of the, that one. Is that backslash?
That looks like backslash. I think that's backslash.
So 2 of the backslashes. Looks kind of like that. So you have domain name, 2 backslashes, username. And you have to put in that delimiter. Well, we ended up trying to get to work without that. We were just putting in a single slash. So it didn't have the double escape like C and C++ and whatnot. And so we totally thought we had bricked the whole thing. Ended up wiping it out and starting from scratch on the Ubuntu machine. But I completely understand the idea of something as simple as a delimiter between your domain name and your username. That can mean the world. Because like with Cisco routers and whatnot, they're created on embedded Linux systems. I'm sure Sonic Wall is very similar to that in some of the things that it does with physical hardware and whatnot. And so these types of things, they're really simple. They sound really stupid. Like, oh yeah, of course, why didn't you know that? Like you would have a conversation with a guy at the bar and he'd be saying that. It's like, yeah, wait until you break it. It's not that simple. It is never that freaking simple. But no, those are big deals. Like the simplest syntactical thing to a computer can make a world of difference. And I just cannot say enough about that. So the idea that something that simple is just like, well, everything's broken. It's like, cannot tell you how I sympathize with that.
Well, that's good to know. I thought you were going to bag on me a little bit.
Well, I can. You want me to?
We've been talking for an hour and 15 minutes.
They like it.
I don't know. Nobody's watched anything yet, but
whatever.
So,
but at any rate, so to recap, be professional, be nice, treat them like you would your grandmother, and if you treat your grandmother poorly, you're a terrible, awful person that needs to die. But remember, build respect, build rapport. It will make your life easier. It will make their lives better. And at the end of the day, mutual respect is the one thing that you can give these people that is going to set you apart from the average nerd, the average geek, the average server person, individual, whatever.
you want to go right down
Up to you.
Hmm.
We can clip this out, redo it.
So, I guess just to kind of go through everything we've talked about, because we've talked a long time. So, like you said, be professional, be polite. You'll get job fulfillment out of it. You just get a whole lot of benefits from it.
That's all good.
And if you have to take a break, it's okay to just pass the baton. Pass the baton, just tell them to call them back, tell them to work on it. Use email as a very helpful tool to help you remember stuff and to help reduce a lot of your headache. Be proactive, and that, again, comes from the email.
Yeah. And part of knowing your email, know your email client. So if you're using Outlook, know how to flag stuff. Know how to write a script so that things they're done a certain way, like high priority or from a specific individual. Have a system to where you can keep up with these sorts of things. Just having an inbox with a mass of everything isn't helpful. I mean, if you can do that, like I do that, I'll be the first one to admit it. I do that, and I keep up with it. But I have my own way of doing that, and it's just something easy for me. But do know your email clients.
So, and then trust, responsibility, and due diligence. Automate tasks, document your tasks, learn to use Excel and take advantage of it, and then always back up your configurations before you make changes.
Yeah.
So, guys, we could talk about this for probably 4 or 5 more hours.
We could talk about it for a long time.
Yeah.
But at the end of the day, it comes back to be a person of your word. If you say you're going to do it, do it. And if you give it off to somebody else, it is still your responsibility to make sure they do it.
So,
That's just the hard truth.
So we hope you guys enjoyed this. Hope you guys learned something. If you have any comments, or if you think we're a bunch of idiots, or if you don't agree with anything we said,
I would
just
love
let
to
us
hear
know.
it. Like, in all honesty, if you guys think something we're saying is a bunch of hogwash, let us know. Because I would like to know. We both do this professionally, so let us know.
So, and don't forget to like
And subscribe.
Thanks, guys.
See ya.